What's up, everyone? Today we're diving into one of the most emotional romantic dramas of 2025, Regretting You, based on Colleen Hoover's best-selling novel. This movie will absolutely wreck you. So let's break down everything that happens. The story centers around Morgan Grant, played by Allison Williams, and her teenage daughter Clara, played by McKenna Grace. At first, their lives seem pretty normal. Morgan had Clara when she was just 17 years old, with her husband Chris. And now they're living what appears to be a happy family life. Clara is your typical teenager, dealing with typical teenage problems, while Morgan seems to have it all together, a stable marriage, a loving sister named Jenny, and a great relationship with her brother-in-law Jonah, played by Dave Franco. But everything changes in one devastating moment. Early in the film, tragedy strikes when Chris and Jenny die together in a horrific car accident. The family is absolutely shattered. Clara loses her father and her aunt in one day, and Morgan loses her husband and her best friend, who also happened to be her sister. The grief is overwhelming for both of them. But here's where things get really dark. As Morgan and Jonah start going through their deceased spouse's belongings, they discover something absolutely devastating. These letters reveal the unthinkable. Chris and Jenny were having an affair behind everyone's backs, hidden away in Chris's toolbox. Morgan finds a series of secret letters from Jenny. This is why they were in the car together when the accident happened. They were sneaking around. The two people Morgan trusted most in the world had been betraying her for years, but now she has to process the fact that he was cheating on her with her own sister. Morgan is completely destroyed by this revelation. Not only did she lose her husband, Jonah is equally devastated to learn that his fiancée Jenny was carrying on this secret relationship. But here's the twist. Jenny was also pregnant and had just given birth to a baby boy. Now, Jonah is questioning whether the child is even his, or if it's actually Chris's baby. Morgan and Jonah make a difficult decision together. They decide to keep the affair a secret from Clara. They don't want to destroy her memory of her father or her aunt. They think they're protecting her. But this decision creates a massive rift between Morgan and Clara. From Clara's perspective, her mom is acting completely strange. Morgan starts drinking heavily, basically always has a wine glass in her hand, and seems to be trying to erase every memory of Chris from their home. Clara doesn't understand why her mother is behaving this way because she doesn't know about the affair. She thinks her mom is just being cruel and trying to forget about her dad. This makes Clara incredibly angry and drives her further away from Morgan. Meanwhile, Clara finds comfort in a new relationship with Miller Adams, played by Mason Thames. Miller is this handsome, charming guy who supports Clara's dreams of becoming an artist and studying theater. He's basically everything she needs during this dark time. The two teenagers quickly fall for each other and start a romance. But Morgan doesn't approve at all. She thinks Clara is moving way too fast with this boy, especially given everything that's happened. She doesn't trust Miller because his father is in prison for selling drugs, and she's worried he's going to hurt her daughter. At the same time, Morgan starts reconnecting with Jonah. They've known each other since high school, and there's always been this underlying attraction between them that they never acted on. Now that they're both dealing with the betrayal of their spouses and grieving together, those old feelings start They begin spending more time together, especially since Morgan is helping Jonah take care of the baby. But this only makes things worse with Clara. When Clara sees her mother getting close to Jonah, she feels like her mom is trying to replace her dad and disrespecting his memory. The tension between mother and daughter continues to escalate. Clara feels like her mom is a hypocrite, judging her relationship with Miller, while Morgan herself is getting involved with Jonah. Things reach a breaking point when Clara actually catches her mom and Jonah kissing. She's absolutely furious and feels completely betrayed. In an emotional and impulsive decision, Clara invites Miller over and tells him she wants to have sex with him right now. She admits to Miller that she's doing this partly to get back at her mom for what she saw. They tell each other they're in love and go through with it. But afterward, Clara breaks down crying and confesses everything that's been going on. Miller is understandably upset that she used him to rebel against her mother, but he stays with her until she falls asleep because he genuinely cares about her. The next morning, Morgan discovers Miller in Clara's bed and loses it. The situation in the household becomes unbearable. Clara is also carrying around her own guilt. She believes she's partially responsible for her aunt Jenny's death because she was texting Jenny right before the accident happened. She thinks if she hadn't been texting, maybe the crash wouldn't have occurred. This guilt is eating her alive. Things get even more complicated when Clara finds out she's been accepted to UNC. the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, to study theater. This is her dream school, but she doesn't tell Miller because he was only waiting. When he finds out at her birthday dinner, he's hurt that she kept it from him and storms out, feeling overwhelmed by everything. Clara and her friend Lexi go to visit Chris and Jenny's graves and get drunk on red wine. Morgan tracks Clara down using a phone app and brings the girls home. As Clara is sick and vomiting, Morgan takes care of her. And there's this moment where you can see Morgan's maternal instincts kicking in despite all their conflicts. The next morning is when everything finally comes to light. Morgan decides she can't keep the secret anymore. She sits Clara down and tells her the truth about Chris and Jenny's affair. She explains why she's been acting the way she has, why she's been distant, and why she's been drinking so much. Clara is shocked, but suddenly everything makes sense. Her dad wasn't the perfect man she thought he was, and her mom wasn't trying to erase his memory. She was trying to cope with an impossible betrayal. Clara also reveals her own guilt about the accident, but Morgan tells her something crucial. It wasn't Jenny who was driving the car that day. It was Chris. So Clara's text messages had nothing to do with the crash. This revelation lifts an enormous weight off Clara's shoulders. Mother and daughter finally have an honest conversation where they both admit they deserve to be happy and they need to support each other instead of fighting. Morgan tells Clara that she's not going to be like her parents. She's not going to repeat their mistakes. She encourages Clara to follow her dreams and go to UNCSA to study theater. The emotional climax happens in a theater, which is symbolic since Clara loves performing arts. Clara uses the theater as a place of refuge to think about everything. Morgan eventually finds her there, and they have this powerful heart-to-heart conversation. Clara admits that she feels like she's no better than her dad because she also kind of participated in cheating. She kissed Miller and fell for him when he technically had a girlfriend at the time. But Morgan reassures her daughter with some powerful wisdom. She tells Clara that we are not defined by our parents' mistakes. She admits that she's been attracted to other people over the years, including Jonah. But what matters is not giving in to temptation. It's about making conscious choices to do the right thing. The two leave the theater arm in arm, closer than they've ever been. Meanwhile, Jonah has his own journey. Early on, when he discovers the affair, he actually abandons his baby son and drops him off at Morgan's house because he's convinced the child isn't biologically his. But Clara, of all people, sets him straight. She tells him that biology doesn't matter and that he needs to step up and be a father to that innocent child. Jonah realizes she's right and returns to his son, accepting him fully regardless of paternity. As Morgan and Jonah's relationship develops, they finally admit they're in love with each other. Morgan shows up at Jonah's house in the pouring rain because this is a romance movie, and of course there's a rain scene. She tells him that they were with the wrong people all along and that she loves him. Jonah kisses her and transfers a watermelon Jolly Rancher from his mouth to hers, which is apparently their thing from back in high school. They sleep together, and in a symbolic gesture, they burn all the letters that Jenny wrote to Chris, literally letting go of the past. The movie ends with a flash forward 1 month later. Everything has worked itself out. Morgan and Jonah are happily together, raising Jenny and Chris's baby as their own. Yes, it turns out the baby is actually Chris's biological child because of the affair. But Jonah loves him as his own son anyway. Clara and Miller are back together and stronger than ever. Miller even plans this elaborate promposal for Clara in her backyard with all their friends and family watching. He shows videos revealing that he had a crush on her long before they even started dating. Even though Miller got accepted to UNCSA off the way, he decides not to go right away because he wants to stay and take care of his aging grandfather who's been sick. But he supports Clara fully in pursuing her theater dreams. Morgan gives Clara her blessing to go to college and chase her passion. The movie ends on this hopeful note where both Morgan and Clara have found happiness again after unimaginable loss and betrayal. They've learned that life is messy. People make mistakes, but what matters is how you move forward and the choices you make. They've learned to communicate honestly with each other, to support each other's happiness, and to not let the mistakes of the past define their futures. Regretting You is ultimately about grief, betrayal, forgiveness, and the complicated but unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter. It's about learning that the people we love aren't perfect, but we can choose to love them anyway, or choose to move on and find new happiness. The movie doesn't shy away from the messy reality of human relationships and shows that healing is possible, even after the deepest wounds. So that's the complete breakdown of Regretting You. It's an emotional roller coaster that will have you crying 1 minute and rooting for these characters the next. If you're a fan of Colleen Hoover's work or just love a good romantic drama that deals with real issues, this movie is definitely worth watching.